Hello, my name is Michelle Hunt, and this is my Module 1 for SPED for administration. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Michelle N. Hunt. I work at Eudora School District in Eudora, Kansas. Here's a picture of my team up here. I am a reading specialist and have been in and out of the classroom for about 15 years. I've taught fourth grade, second grade, fifth grade, reading interventions, and math interventions. Kind of moved in and out as needed. During COVID, I taught fifth grade, and then they moved me back to reading. I've taught second and been moved back to reading, so it's just kind of as needed where I'm at. Okay. I am born and raised in Kansas, so I'm a huge KU Jayhawks fan and Kansas City Chiefs fan. I have two kids, Haley, who is 13, and Blaine, who's 3. Here's a picture of him down here. I am married to Jeff Hunt and have been for almost 19 years. Here's my husband and my 3-year-old last summer. We have 3 animals, a dog, cat, and a tortoise. We spend lots of time at the softball fields. My daughter is a competitive softball player, so here's a picture of her here at the softball fields. If we are not at home, we are at the softball fields or at softball practice 90% of the time. Again, I am a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan. Go Chiefs, got my Chiefs shirt on for Red Friday, and a huge Jayhawks fan. So here is my Module 1 for inclusive school culture. So the first article, 7 ways to create an inclusive classroom environment. I'm just going to go over this very briefly. In summary, the article gives 7 steps to help create an inclusive environment in your school or your classroom. I wrote the steps down here. Supported services for students such as SPED, specialist, ESL, training for all teachers, name pronunciation, which I taught in a school where that would be, when I first started teaching, that would have been very useful for some teachers. I grew up in, so my background, I went to Shimerson North, and I had a very diverse population, so I knew a lot of those pronunciations of different words or names, but a lot of our teachers struggled with that, so that would have been something. Expectations for students, just having those high expectations, and then making real-world connections with our students. Look for curriculum biases. Look for redistricting to help with integrating all student bodies into an area. I know that is something my district did when we got a new elementary school. We put everyone in one school instead of being one side, a town versus the other. Assessment needs is something, respectful community in our school, and a safe place for discussions. So I thought this was had all the aspects of that standard, supportive, equitable, culturally responsible, and inclusive school culture. This one's on inclusive leadership in education. It did state that inclusion is now defined as a social justice approach to education designed to ensure every child's basic human rights to an individually, culturally, and developmentally appropriate education. They did define equity. Equity is defined to be fair and impartial, and equality is treating everyone equally. An inclusive leader values everyone's differences and values everyone's input in the education process. The article stated not to forget about all stakeholders, bring them together and their diverse backgrounds. Research shows that inclusive leaders need to have a visible commitment, humility, awareness of bias, be curious, cultural intelligence, and effective collaboration needs to happen. And things that can be worked on always for leaders are practicing the self-awareness, living a shared vision with your staff, relationship building with staff, students, and community members, and accepting change. And on this one, I had, again, all the components of the standard. So 10 reasons for inclusive schools. This was the third article. Equal access to education, aligned age group learning environments, children become accepting of each other, differences, meaningful relationships and friendships amongst students of all levels and backgrounds, student confidence among those different groups of students. Staff are trained and knowledgeable about curriculum. SPED services to help in the core. Assistive technology is needed, and then everyone is welcome and valued. And again, I thought that this one hit all of them. So, what is an inclusive education? How to implement it? This article defines inclusive education as a teaching model whereby all students, regardless of ability, learn together in one environment. Doing this makes all students are treated equally and that the students learn about each other's differences and celebrate them. It had 3 definitions. Full inclusion is all students within the core classroom. Partial inclusion would be students in the full classroom until additional support is needed, which is the model we see most of the time. And then mainstreaming, students start off in that self-contained classroom, then are moved to the core classroom when they can handle it. I feel like that is the model that we used to use when I was in school. Having an inclusive school helps the well-being of students. They gain self-confidence, improved communication skills, and a better quality of all-around education. And this one I thought was equitable and inclusive school culture. So what are the roles of principals in an inclusive school? In summary, the article states that the principals need to state their philosophy for an inclusive school to their staff, make that known, make it clear to students, community, staff members. Principals should have SPED staff assigned to grade levels, not just a SPED department by themselves, with students assigned to them. SPED staff should have a common plan time with those general education teachers so that they can collaborate. Principals need to be sure that those SPED students are participating in core instruction with their peers. This also helps students reach those developmental milestones as well as educational. We need to make sure that accommodations and interventions are documented correctly as well as used correctly in their IEP. And principals need to make sure that they include staff and parents to help develop those inclusive schools. In this one, I put supportive, equitable, and inclusive school culture. So inclusive school culture best practices. In summary, the article states that students, as they advance in grades, exclusion becomes more prevalent. It is said that schools should not just be to give a grade, score, or prize, but should be giving every student access to all that school has to offer. When that student graduates, they should have been exposed to all emotional, social, and educational skills. And students do not learn these skills when they are separated from their peers. When we create an inclusive environment, we do include everyone. When we think about how we teach, we can give our students a choice so they are able to complete the assignment at their ability level. Another thing to make schools equitable would be making sure that fees are reduced for students who may not be able to afford that extracurricular activity or even waived, but would like to be included. Making a level playing field for all is important for the success of all students. And I thought that this one was covered both equitable and inclusive school culture. So building an inclusive school culture with equity of access to knowledge. So to summarize, the video just said equal access to college and career-ready program of study is essence of justice. So making sure all students have that equal access to all the classes that their peers would have. One thing to do would be how to know where to have students at and where to place them is where do they want to be in 5 years, 10 years, and make those classes meaningful for them. Make sure that you are aware of how the students in your school and community learn. Not all curriculums are written the same or interventions, so we need to make sure that we are getting those programs that best fit our needs of our school and community. And then collaboration is important among teachers. Having that time. So I thought this was supportive, equitable, culturally responsible, and then inclusive school culture. So the value of inclusive education. This article states that inclusive education means different and diverse students learning side by side in the same classroom. Inclusive schools help change attitudes toward discrimination. Inclusive education is not cheap, but something that needs to be done to make sure that these students are getting the same opportunities in education as everyone else. And I thought this one covered equitable, culturally responsive, an inclusive school culture. So creating inclusive schools for all students. So in summary, this article says that schools around the country are creating inclusive schools and is having positive results. After the American Disabilities Education Act, schools started not pulling students out of the room and sending students to other schools. Schools who have special education islands, as was quoted from the article, or classroom with a lot of SPED students and a few other students, and this is not considered an inclusive school and is hard to manage for classroom teachers. Students in inclusive schools have the same access to that rigorous curriculum, and it doesn't matter their disability. There is no exception to this rule. You can either modify the curriculum, get an adapted device, or services as needed for the classroom. Schools are seeing an increase in scores across the board for these inclusive practices, and I have thoughts on why that's happening. Because this is best practices for all students. We're doing the best practices for all students. So that's how our students learn. But anyways, that's another subject. This has happened by increasing the core and having curriculum that works for every student, and teachers need to work together to have curriculum that works for all students. And I thought this one was equitable, inclusive school culture. So tips for creating that inclusive school culture. They talked about the All Handicapped Children's Act of 1975. That's when things started changing to receive free and appropriate schooling for all students. Students would start having IEPs then and receiving those accommodation and modifications. Today's laws state that students must receive their education in the least restrictive environment. To have an inclusive school and classroom, you must have a shared responsibility, teacher collaboration, school-wide behavior management program, and strong communications throughout staff. The reasons why you should have an inclusive school are students learn social skills, there's fewer absences, fewer behavior problems, higher rates of tolerance and acceptance of others, and great supports. Having those flexible groupings in classrooms also was talked about, and how it helps destigmatize groups that are put together. And I said that this was inclusive school culture and equitable. So here's my definition of inclusive school culture. Inclusive school culture ensures that every child's basic human right to an individually, culturally, and developmentally appropriate education. And this is something that I think really have really strong feelings for. Inclusive education. An inclusive school culture is defined as a place where students, regardless of ability, race, language, or income, are integral members of classrooms. And then inclusive leaders are committed to equity and providing high quality learning experiences for all children. Inclusive culture is an inclusive leader should have a visible commitment, have humility, awareness of bias, curiosity, cultural intelligence, and effective collaboration. And then the advocate question, a leader can lead by example, but build relationships with all staff, students, parents, and community members. Make sure to create and communicate a shared vision of inclusiveness in your school. Strategies and plans that I could use in my school. Specialists, I am a reading specialist and have been a math specialist, so that is something that we do in our school. And culturally biased materials, and I know that a lot of districts are working towards that now. SPED teachers for grades, not students. Again, that is what is in my school. We have a SPED teacher for every single grade in our school. And our school classrooms are, we hardly ever pull out our students. Every student receives core instruction. They're pulled out for intervention time. So those special education students would be pulled out at the same time that anyone that would be on a tier 2 or tier 3 would be pulled out. All our teachers have common plan times with their SPED staff. We do have full inclusion. Sorry, my light went off. Or another thing would be full inclusion. SPED staff help in core. All staff trained on all curriculum, and then assistive technology is needed. So negative assumption. Ways to change negative assumptions as a principal on inclusive school. Train staff, let them be aware of what's going on, train them, have them knowledgeable. A lot of times, fear is what creates those negative assumptions. So if our staff doesn't know what to expect or what the change is, then those negative assumptions might start. So just creating that environment, that safe environment where staff is trained, and that healthy environment for staff. Have supports in place for those classroom teachers. Sometimes it's just the overwhelming feeling of how am I going to handle this, not necessarily the student themselves. So having those supports in place, whether it be SPED staff or um, specialists or assistive technology, just help get those in place. Have a safe place for discussion. Those PLC meetings or those collab meetings with staff should be able to share how they're feeling and bounce ideas off each other. And then make sure that your staff has a common plan time so they can share those ideas and all that. My concluding thoughts. I do feel I have a better understanding of Standard 2.1 because I was able to analyze those articles and apply the knowledge that I learned into my summaries and questions. I feel that my educational leadership skills have become more rounded, and I am open to a fully inclusive school after this assignment. The relevance for this assignment. This assignment was relevant to my current learning as a future reader or leader by having me read about the importance of inclusive schools and how they benefit our students and staff. This assignment changed my mindset in that I have always thought that students who were pulled out for a little bit would not be affected by this much. But after reading the articles and knowing how this can make them feel, shows how important it is for all students to be in the classroom at all times. As a future leader, I will definitely make it a priority to always question why my students are being pulled out and how are they benefiting from this. We just had a change in leadership in my school, and since then we are moving to a full inclusive classrooms. This is something we're working slowly to. Before students would miss core time, and as I read, or before students would miss core time, and or we also had island education classrooms before our new leadership, which is something that we do not have now. So reflection. In my current position as a reading specialist, I work with a lot of struggling students. I am the reading teacher. There's 6 of us in our building who takes all the students who doesn't matter their disability or their background. I have those behavior students in my room. I have students on IEPs. I have special needs students. So they're all in my room normally. Groups are made around those students in my room so there's a proper fit for all students. I have always thought that all students should be in the classroom to make those peer connections and learn from their peers. But this assignment really helped me solidify all that I had thought or felt. I fully am supportive of an inclusive education. I was a student who was also on an IEP and who was hardly pulled out. Yes, the work was hard as the student, but I am where I am today because of the persistence of the SPED staff, my parents, and the teachers in my elementary school. I know back in the 90s, we still didn't have full inclusion in those classrooms, but my school was, and I definitely know that I benefited from that. As a future leader, I feel that this is one of my missions to make sure that all my students receive the same education. It doesn't matter their disability, background, or anything like that. So here are my references. Thank you.